The night my son-in-law slid a thick gray binder across the table and called it my retirement surprise, I knew something was wrong. Not because of what he said, but because of what my daughter didn't say. Emily had always been the one to fill silence with gentle chatter. As a little girl, she narrated our grocery trips like a sports commentator, told the dog bedtime stories, and grew up into a woman who apologizes whenever the server brings extra ice. But that night, her mouth was a straight line, her eyes glossy, her fingers wrapped around a stemless glass of Chardonnay like it contained her entire spine. "Open it," Nate said, tapping the binder with a manicured finger. Nate's nails were buff to a shine. There was a time I thought that meant he respected himself. Now, after 3 years of watching him sell new versions of the same idea to different men in fleece vests, I wasn't sure it meant anything other than he liked reflected light. I flipped the cover. Inside, neat dividers labeled safety, care options, finances, legal. A cheerful stock photo of a woman my age hugging a nurse who had the kind of smile people wear when they're not allowed to yawn on the clock. Magnolia Harbor Assisted Living. The brochure's tagline in a looping teal script. Where your golden years feel like home. "Mom," Emily began, then stopped. She looked at Nate. He took over. He was good at that. "The thing is," he said, "we've all noticed some slip-ups, the stove, the fall in the backyard, the way you forgot to pick up Ollie last month." "I was 10 minutes late," I said. "He sat on the curb," Nate said, "in the sun, without a water bottle." I should have asked, whose kid lives 2 blocks from school and doesn't carry a water bottle? I should have said, "Nate, you forgot to pick up your marriage." Instead, I turned the page. A glossy aerial photo of a building that looked like a hotel and a hospital had a baby. A courtyard. Hydrangeas. A woman in a cardigan playing cards with 3 men who all wore the exact same expression. I used to decide things. "Magnolia Harbor is award-winning," Nate said. "An incredible memory care unit, progressive programming, farm-to-table meals. We booked a tour, Saturday at 10. "That's the Twins' soccer game," I said. Emily flinched like I'd smacked the table. "Mom," she said, then stopped again. She lifted the wine and took a swallow so big I heard her swallow. "Just try to be open," Nate said. "A lot of this is about safety and monetizing your home equity in a prudent way. The market is complicated." He said market the way a priest says God, as both comfort and threat. I closed the binder. "Honey," I said, "did you want to talk?" Emily's eyes flicked toward the hallway as if our conversation could sprint away from her. "We want you to be safe," she said. "I want you to have friends, activities. You don't even use the upstairs of your house. You sleep downstairs on the couch with the TV on and you burned your kettle," Nate added. "Remember? You left it on. The neighbor smelled something." "I was boiling water to loosen the glue on a price tag," I said. "On that mug Emily bought me from that store that only sells mugs with jokes about how much wine women drink before noon. The tag melted." Nate smiled with his whole face, but not his eyes. "Right," he said softly, like I had proved his point. The twins thundered down the stairs, their socked feet sliding on the wood. Oliver and Grace, 9 years old, a tangle of elbows and opinions. Oliver barreled into my lap with a hug so sudden, my glasses tilted. "Grandma," he said, "will you come to my game Saturday? I'm going to try a bicycle kick. You're not allowed to scream if I fall." "Me too," Grace said, slipping under my arm like she had always belonged there. "We're playing the Penguins. They fake you out by sliding, then they foul." "I wouldn't miss it," I said. Nate's mouth tightened. "We'll see," he said. I looked at my daughter. "We'll see," I repeated. Her eyes dropped to her glass. "Mom," she said, "there are moments when a life splits down the middle. People think it's loud, a crash or a scream, but mine arrived like a fork set quietly beside a plate. I saw 2 futures. One where I slid into the soft rubber of other people's decisions, another where I stood up. It was my 70th birthday dinner. Nate had ordered a cake from a bakery in town where the counter girls all call brides Queen. The cake's frosting read "Happy 70th, Margaret," in a tight cursive that looked like a secret written for someone else. Nate cut thin slices. Emily didn't eat hers. The twins argued about the biggest piece, and I smiled like we were a family that told each other the truth. After the twins went upstairs, I helped Emily gather plates. We met at the sink like we had for 30 years. We are good at side by side. When she was 5, she stood on a yellow step stool to reach the faucet. When she was 25, we washed wine glasses after her engagement party while her friends danced like foals in the living room. When Tom died, we washed hospital mugs together the morning after the funeral because everything else felt too loud. "Do you want this?" I asked, holding up my paper plate with a smear of frosting. Something in the question cracked me. "Do you want this?" Something sweet, a little messy, mine to offer. Emily nodded too quickly. "Sure," she said. She took it, then set it on the counter beside the sink and gripped the edge like a railing on a stormy boat. "Mom," she said, and the words sounded older. "I'm not going there," I said quietly. "Not now, not because Nate made a PowerPoint in a binder." She closed her eyes, opened them. "Please don't make this a fight," she said. "What is it then?" "It's a plan," she said, and as she said it, I heard Nate's cadence in her mouth. "You don't have to be alone in that house. You don't have to worry about stairs. We can sell and invest, and you'll have guaranteed care for—" "Who is we?" I asked. She flinched. "Mom, who is we when it's my house?" Her face folded. "I didn't mean... I just..." Nate walked in with the empty cake platter and set it on the counter like punctuation. "Saturday at 10, he said brightly. "Magnolia Harbor, you'll love it." That night, in my own kitchen, I put the binder on the table and stared at the title page until the teal script blurred. My house smelled faintly of lemon oil and dust. The clock above the stove ticked with a sound that had always soothed me. Tick-tock, time moving forward like it knows where it's going. Tom had built these kitchen cabinets himself. He was not a carpenter. He was a high school guidance counselor who believed kids needed adults who weren't afraid of their sadness. He died 9 years ago on a Tuesday. He put down a cup of coffee, said he felt odd, and was gone before the EMTs finished their first question. "Any chest pain?" he said, then exhaled like he was putting down a bag he had carried too far. I had learned I could be alone. I had learned I could be brave. I had also learned that the people you love most can make decisions in your absence that echo in your presence. So I opened the binder and read. Not because I let Nate pick my future, but because it is dangerous to refuse to learn the language of your enemies. The brochure was all sunlight and quilts. The legal tab contained a draft of something titled Durable Power of Attorney. Names already filled. Agent Emily Collins, successor agent Nathaniel Collins. My heart climbed into my throat. I turned the page and found a pre-filled healthcare proxy. Agent Emily Collins. Alternate, Nathaniel Collins. If you do not wish life-sustaining treatments. My hands shook. There was also a typed list titled Concerns. Apparently, I left the stove on several times. I had wandered at night. I had forgotten appointments. I had become irritable. Under cognitive screening, they listed MoCA, 23/30ths, inconclusive. When exactly had someone tested my cognition? A physician's name sat beneath the bullet points. A doctor I recognized as the father of one of the boys from Oliver's soccer team. I tried to remember the last time I'd seen him. A Saturday. Sidelines. Someone mentioning memory. I had laughed and said, if memory is the measure, I've been 80 since 30. Lord, I thought, he took notes. I closed the binder, turned off the light, and took a long shower. Afterward, wrapped in a robe, I stood in my living room and decided a thing so clearly it felt like someone else said it aloud. I would not be put in a place against my will. I would not be moved like furniture across a floor I had waxed myself. I would not let a man who says monetizing, more often than I say, please tuck me into a bed that wheels. I slept in my downstairs guest room with my hand flat against the wall, feeling the old house breathe. I woke before dawn, put on a sweater with the elbows mended, and made coffee. Then I did something I had done only 3 times in my life. I called a lawyer. Her name was Avery Cohen. She was younger than my daughter by 5 years and older than Nate by 10. Her assistant put me through less than an hour after I left a message that began, "I think my family wants to take my house." Avery's voice was alert and calm, the way nurses sound when they ask your pain level and you tell them 8 because 10 feels rude. "Tell me everything," she said. And I did. I described the binder, the forms, the tour, the way my daughter's voice trembled, the doctor's name, the way Nate kept using the word safety like a lid. "Do you have any documents you've already signed?" she asked. "No," I said, which is something I am proud of this morning and embarrassed about in general. "Good," she said. "That gives us room. Margaret, you're competent. You sound competent. You've called me before anyone filed anything. That's good. You're not their property." She paused. "Do you trust your daughter?" I pictured Emily at 5 with pink barrettes, at 14 with mascara smudges, at 19 standing in a dorm room doorway with a lamp under her arm, at 32 in a white dress turning toward the aisle. I pictured her last night, silent while her husband explained my future. "I love my daughter," I said. Avery understood the difference. We met that afternoon in her office above a bakery that sells cookies the size of fists. She wore a navy blazer and shoes that looked like they could run. Everything about her was precise without being sharp. She offered me water and then didn't push when I declined. "We're going to do 3 things," she said, flipping open a legal pad. 1, we'll put your house into a revocable living trust with you as trustee. That will make it harder, not impossible, but harder, for someone to swoop in and start moving assets without your say-so. 2, we'll draft your own durable power of attorney and health care proxy, naming someone you trust. And 3, we'll pull your medical records to see who wrote what and when. Someone I trust, I repeated. Who counts? You tell me, Avery said. My sister, I said, and my throat tightened. She's in California. We're not estranged. We're just in that fog where everyone's busy and time keeps lying about how much there is. Call her, Avery said. See if she's willing. If she is, we'll set it up. She will be, I said. I knew this with the same certainty I know where my spare keys are. My sister Rachel answers the phone like a confession. She will say, "Oh, honey, of course," and she will get on a plane if I ask her to. Love lives in the bones, even when we neglect its muscles. We spent 2 hours building a fence while my house sat in morning sun like a patient animal. Avery explained things carefully and waited for my questions. When I told her about the cognitive screen in the binder, she arched an eyebrow. "Did you agree to testing?" she asked. "No." "Then it won't hold up as anything more than gossip, but it's a signal. They've been gathering ammunition." "Why?" I asked, and the word was both a plea and a dare. Why would my daughter do this? Avery was gentle. "Sometimes the child believes they're protecting a parent from danger," she said. "Sometimes a spouse believes they're protecting a bank account from a house. Sometimes both feel true at once." We went to the bank together. At my age, the tellers know your name, and the manager knows the church you stopped going to. I closed an old joint account Emily and I had opened 12 years ago after my hip surgery, back when I needed rides and grocery help and left an emergency debit card with my daughter who never used it except for milk and Tylenol. We left the bank with paperwork that made me feel newly solid. Avery helped me call my primary care doctor and schedule a comprehensive cognitive evaluation. My idea, not because I believed I needed it, but because I wouldn't allow a sideline diagnosis to become the scaffolding of my life. We also requested a printed copy of every note any physician had written with my name on it in the past 2 years. Before I left, Avery placed a hand flat on the legal pad like it was a map and we were choosing a route. "Margaret," she said, "you have time to think. Don't let anyone compress you into a corner because their timeline is louder." Driving home, I rolled down the window and let cold spring air slap my cheeks. The trees along Maple Street were just beginning to fuzz green. In the rearview mirror, I saw a woman who looked like my mother. Soft jaw, stubborn mouth, eyes that don't scare easily. I said out loud into the empty car, "I am not furniture," and then I laughed until I had to pull over. Saturday, I went to Magnolia Harbor anyway. It was 10 minutes from my house, tucked behind a shopping center with a pierogi place and a gym called Sculpt. The parking lot smelled like hot mulch. The sign out front showed a hand holding a hummingbird. The hummingbird looked trapped. Emily held my elbow as we crossed the walkway. I wanted to say, "Please don't handle me like glass. If I break, it won't be your fault." Nate walked ahead, carrying the binder like a diploma. A woman in chiffon and pearls met us at the door and said my name as if she'd been practicing. "Margaret, we're thrilled you're here. I'm Celeste." We toured a studio apartment staged with lemon curtains and a blanket folded like a brochure. We peeked into the dining room where people ate chicken that had been named by someone else. A woman at a table with two men looked up and smiled with that specific warmth older women offer one another. Across from her, a man in a sweater vest stared at the middle distance while a sports anchor's voice narrated a game on mute. Emily squeezed my arm. "Look, Mom," she whispered, "they have a painting studio." I like to paint on my back porch while the accumulated wisdom of birds narrates. I like to leave dishes to dry and read novels in a chair Tom freed from a curb with a grin that said, "Treasure is just trash that met love." I like to wear pants with pockets and leave my shopping list behind and text my neighbor that I am out of nutmeg. I like to host book club where no one finishes the book. This place offered activities every hour on the hour. None of them looked like my life. "This is our memory care wing," Celeste said brightly as we stepped onto a carpet with overlapping circles in shades of beige. "It's secure but bright and cheery." "Secure," Nate repeated, like he had found a deal at Costco. A woman with white hair and lipstick, a shade too hopeful, reached for my hand. "Are you new?" she asked. "Just visiting," I said. "I used to visit," she said. Then one day they said visiting hours were over, and I laughed because I lived here. Her voice bobbed cheerful as a cork. On our way out of the wing, I looked back. She was still watching me, her hand raised in a wave that looked like a warning flag. In the parking lot, Nate did something kind, which is the worst time to do something mean. "We'll help you pack," he said. "So you don't have to—" "I'm not moving," I said a little too loudly. Emily startled. For a second, she looked relieved, then fear washed across her face. It occurred to me she was carrying something heavier than a plan. "Mom," she said, "please don't make this a thing we don't come back from." I thought of the things you don't come back from. Heart attacks and betrayals and the slow erosion that happens when you let someone set your thermostat. I thought of my kitchen and my porch and the framed photo of Emily at 8, gap-toothed and damp-haired, leaning into Tom's side like a tree leans toward light. "I'm going to handle my life," I said. "You're going to handle yours. We can love each other while we do that." Nate sucked in a breath. "Margaret," he said, sounding patient and tired, like a man explaining Excel to a Labrador. "This isn't practical. Your house is a liability. Stairs, maintenance, market risk. You're sitting on 7 figures that aren't working for you. Meanwhile, you're on a fixed income." I turned to him. "Don't say meanwhile," I said. "It gives you away." He blinked. "Gives me away how?" As a man who wants something and thinks he's entitled to take it if he can sound like a spreadsheet. His face went pink. It was the first honest color I'd seen on him in months. I did not slam my car door. I closed it with manners. On the drive home, I called Rachel. She answered on the second ring, out of breath. "Are you running?" I asked. "I was chasing a dog that isn't mine," she said. "How are you?" "Do you want to be my durable power of attorney and healthcare proxy?" I asked. "Give me a plane ticket and a pen," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. We signed the papers 2 days later at Avery's office. Rachel cried afterward and said, "I should have been here more." And I said, "We are here now." And we went downstairs and bought one of those giant cookies and ate it with our hands in the parking lot, like teenagers. That afternoon, I found the courage to do something else. I eavesdropped. I had gone to Emily's to drop off a sweater I'd mended for Grace. I let myself in with the code because that is what moms do in the houses they helped make possible. Voices from the kitchen floated down the hall. "I'm telling you, we need to file now," Nate was saying in a low, urgent whisper. "The market is cooling. If we wait, we'll lose 50, 60 grand, at least." "She's not a house," Emily said. "She kind of is in this situation," Nate said, and something in me broke a little more. And if she keeps resisting, we petition for guardianship and control the sale. Cohen won't stand up if we have medical evidence." "We don't," Emily said softly. "We can get it," Nate said. "You've seen her, the kettle, the pickup, the bills. And listen, my guy says the unit in that harbor place is booked. But if we put down a deposit—" "Your guy," Emily repeated, and now the tremble in her voice turned to a thin, bright wire. "Your guy also said your last deal was a sure thing, and then our savings evaporated." "Invested," Nate said. "They're invested. Jesus, Em, don't start." "I'm not starting," she said. "I'm finishing. I can't do this if it's about a windfall. This is my mother." I stood in the hallway and held my keys so tightly their teeth left half moons in my palm. I could have walked in and yelled, and some part of my body burned too. Instead, I backed away on aching heels, let the door click shut behind me like I had only remembered I'd left something in the car, then sat in my parked Civic with my heart galloping in my chest. At home, I opened every window and let April slide through. The house breathed. I breathed with it. And then I sat down and made a list titled, "In my neat teacher's handwriting, if they push, I pull." The top item: find out who owns Magnolia Harbor. 3 phone calls and 1 internet rabbit hole later, I had a name I recognized: Haddon Senior Living Holdings. My neighbor's son had interned there last summer. Nice lobby, mean spreadsheets. Their local asset, a cluster of facilities, including Magnolia Harbor, had been put up for sale. I didn't know why. I didn't need to. A sentence formed in my mind with such ferocity I had to stand up. If they put me in a place, it will be one I choose. The second sentence arrived like a laugh. Or buy. You do not expect to say that sentence at 70 years old. I don't own a yacht. I drive an 11-year-old car with a dent I refuse to fix because the dent is honest. I live in a 3-bedroom house with nothing on the walls I don't love, but I do own that house. Tom and I bought it when the mortgage rate started with an 8, and you could still borrow sugar from a neighbor without anyone texting for permission. 35 years of payments. 35 summers of painting the porch. 35 winters of keeping the water trickling in the upstairs bathroom so the pipes don't freeze. The house had appreciated like a stock with good manners. I had assets. I also had time and a spine I was finished apologizing for. I made more phone calls. I called my friend Ruth, who used to run the administration side of a rehabilitation center across town before it got sold to a group of men who wear socks with boats on them and think lemons should be trademarked. Ruth had retired last fall and now spent her mornings taking French and her afternoons taking naps. "Do you want a project?" I asked. "Not unless it's delicious," she said. "It might be," I said. "How delicious is owning the place people try to put you in?" Ruth didn't even pause. "What are we buying?" We met in my kitchen with filter coffee and a stack of printouts. Avery joined us by speakerphone on my kitchen table. The 3 of us made a triangle that felt like safety. "Can we even do this?" I asked when I finished my breathless pitch. "Is it legal? Is it insane?" "It's ambitious," Avery said, "and possibly the most Margaret move I've ever heard of." Ruth laughed, then sobered. "We need to see the books," she said. "We need to know the debt, the occupancy, the staff mix, the lease terms. We need to know if the kitchen is a money pit or a miracle." "So we ask," I said. We asked. Ruth knew who to call, and apparently retirement doesn't mean you forget your passwords. Within a week, we were sitting in a conference room at Haddon Senior Living Holdings, facing a man named Spencer whose haircut made me want to offer him a sandwich. "We'd be open to structuring it as a management buyout," Spencer said, flipping through a deck that looked both glossy and exhausted. "We're looking to move off certain assets that don't fit our current strategy." "Your current strategy being?" Avery asked. "Optimizing for scale," he said, which made me want to take a shower. "Magnolia Harbor," Ruth said. "What's the real story?" Spencer's mouth quirked. It was the first actual human expression I had seen on him. "It's fine," he said. "Good bones. Better than we've cared to notice. Occupancy is at 71% and should be at 86. Labor costs are high because we had a rash of agency hires after the last administrator left. Kitchen is not a miracle." "Debt?" Avery asked. "Doable," Spencer said. "With a partner. Or 5. He looked at me then, like maybe I was a decorative plant. No offense. None taken, I said. I didn't come to impress you. We spent 2 hours asking and listening, then another hour in the parking garage leaning against Ruth's Prius, while Avery said sentences like, "If we use Margaret's house as collateral, I will handcuff myself to the courthouse steps." "Good," I said, because I wasn't going to. We cobbled together a plan that was less crazy than it sounded. Ruth had contacts who wanted to invest actual money in something that was not a map of software. Avery found a way to create an LLC with a name so bland it became a force field, River Maple Health. I would contribute capital from savings and a conservative home equity line, not to risk the house, but to leverage it gently and become a majority owner diluted only by people who believed residents are people, not line items. Ruth would be our operator. Avery would be the adult in the room. We aimed for controlling interest, with an option to acquire the rest if we made Magnolia Harbor thrive again. All of this happened with the slow, stubborn momentum I had always brought to projects that matter. Organizing a school library with no budget, getting a needy kid into a summer program by calling every phone number in the county, sitting with Tom's hand in the emergency room while the clock lied. Hope isn't a feeling. It's a decision repeated until your bones know how. Meanwhile, back in my smaller life, Emily called daily. Sometimes she sounded like my daughter. Sometimes she sounded like a woman repeating a speech she had promised to memorize. "Mom," she said one morning, "I found your tax bill in your mailbox. You were supposed to drop it off at the town hall, remember?" "Thank you," I said. "I'll bring it tomorrow." "Maybe I should do it," she said. "Maybe I should let you," I said. And she was quiet a long beat. After 3 weeks, her voice changed. It was the way someone sounds when the floor under their feet is not as solid as their spouse promised. "Mom," she said, "if this is about Nate, if this is about money." "I know," I said gently. "I know more than you think." She exhaled, and in that breath was 35 years between us. "He screwed up," she said. "He invested in a thing that turned out to be another thing. He believes in it. He always believes. Sometimes I think he believes too much." "What do you believe?" I asked. "That I'm tired," she said. "That I miss my husband from before the whiteboard. That I want you to be safe because I can't take one more thing breaking." "Then say that," I said softly. "Don't say binder words. Say the words that are real." "I don't know how to do that without hurting you," she said. "You can't," I said. "That's the price of truth. But I will recover. I'm not glass." Silence hummed. "Will you come for dinner?" she asked finally. "Yes," I said. "I will always come for dinner." What I did not tell her is that earlier that day, I had signed a preliminary agreement to acquire a controlling stake in Magnolia Harbor. It took 6 weeks to close. 6 weeks of due diligence and second looks and third thoughts. 6 weeks of waking at 3 a.m. with my heart galloping and telling myself the story of the woman I wanted to be, the one who does not wait to be told. Ruth toured the building with a clipboard and the exact expression she used to wear when she discovered a closet filled with expired pudding cups. She came back with lists. Fix the roof above the memory wing. Replace agency staff with permanent hires at wages that don't insult. Bring in the occupational therapist who used to run that brilliant mobility program before budget cuts. Turned it into chair yoga with a DVD player. Revamp the kitchen with Miss Janice, the cook who left because she got tired of being told to do more with less. Offer her the job and the authority to do more with more. "You're going to raise costs," Spencer said when we pushed back our chairs in the conference room to sign. "Are you sure you're comfortable with that?" "No," I said truthfully, "but I'm comfortable with being able to sleep." A week later, we closed. On a quiet Thursday morning, after a sunrise so pink even the dog walkers stopped to look, I walked through the doors of Magnolia Harbor as a resident. "Welcome, Margaret," Celeste said, warm as toast. "We've got a corner unit for you with a view of the courtyard. Your daughter dropped off some photos. We put a few up to make it feel like yours." "That was nice," I said. It was nice. It also made me want to pick up each frame and inventory the story it told. A family at a beach. Tom's grin under a baseball cap. Emily holding the twins. damp and ferocious after a sprinkler run, life as brochure. I brought one suitcase. I wore a cardigan with deep pockets and my wedding band on a chain. I sat on the bed of my staged studio and listened to the muffled steps in the hallway. At noon, while a woman in lavender scrubs walked me to lunch, I sent a text to Ruth. In place. Staff smiling with their eyes. The rice is glue. Please fix. She sent back a thumbs up and a red heart and the words, Phase 1, Phase 1. I let Emily believe I had surrendered because I needed her to exhale. I needed to see how far Nate would push when he thought I'd given in. I also needed to see the building from the inside, not just the books and the HVAC schedule and all the places staff hide from men like Spencer. That evening, Nate and Emily came by with the twins. The kids crawled on my bed like puppies, then got bored and asked if there was a kids' place. Down the hall, Celeste said. We have a family room with games. They raced out, their laughter smacking the walls with life. Emily sat and looked at me like a friend who doesn't know how to ask for help. Nate stood, hands in his successful man pockets, surveying the room like a realtor silently calculating comps. It's nice, he said finally. Obviously it's not home, but it's safe, Emily said. She reached for my hand. Thank you, Mom. For what? I asked gently. For not making me fight you, she said. Tears filled her eyes. I'm tired of fighting everything. I squeezed her fingers. Me too, I said. Nate cleared his throat. So, he said briskly, we'll get started on listing the house. I have a guy who can do a pre-list inspection. It'll need some updates. Bathrooms, maybe the porch. We'll have to stage. No, I said. He blinked. No? No pre-list inspection, I said. No staging. When I decide to list, you'll be the 10th person to know. He smiled at me like a man indulging a toddler. The market won't wait for your feelings, he said. Timing matters. It's not yours to time, I said quietly. He glanced at Emily. She looked at her lap. The twins barreled back in and saved us from more sentences we couldn't afford to say. After they left, I sat alone and listened. A woman with a laugh like a church bell rolled by in her wheelchair. Somewhere, a television announced a medical miracle. A nurse hummed an old song out of tune in a comforting way. At 10, Ruth and Avery and I met in the administrator's office and introduced ourselves to the night staff as what we were. Janice cried when we offered her the kitchen. Caleb, a nurse with forearms like someone who knows how to lift people without hurting them, shook my hand like he was planting something. Priya, interim administrator for too long, exhaled so deeply her shoulders dropped an inch. I told them the way to save money is to stop making everyone quit, she said. They sent me a spreadsheet. I slept that night in a building I owned. I felt both more and less alone than I had in years. The next 2 months were proof that restoration looks like mess from the inside. We ripped up carpet and discovered floors that had forgotten how to shine and taught them. We replaced the hummingbird sign with a simple one that read, Magnolia Harbor, and underneath it in smaller letters, We know your name. We hired a young occupational therapist named Andre who began each mobility class by asking everyone what they used to love about walking, and the answers were better than any medicine. Feeling wind, standing at the stove, the dog leaning into my calf, the way your feet know home. We raised wages. We wrote a schedule for breaks and then enforced it like it was sacred. We brought the hairdresser back on Wednesdays. We banned the word bather. We added books to the small library and a real piano to the lounge. We stopped the practice of waking people at 5 a.m. for vital checks, because whose vitals are served by being treated like a data point. The first week, someone complained to me that we were coddling people. I looked him in the eye and said, we are humaning them. Ruth ran the building like an orchestra. Priya learned to say no. Janice turned the rice light in slyly brown. Andre made a list of every resident who used to play anything and brought them instruments that fit their hands now. I answered phones and wrote checks and sat with a woman named May while she cried for a husband who died in 1989 like it was yesterday, which for her it was. Emily came every Tuesday with the twins. We played Uno in the family lounge and ate cookies that were not like mine, and that was all right. She would watch me sometimes with this precise concentration, like she was calibrating her fear. Twice I saw her look at Ruth with curiosity she tried to smother. She asked a few questions about the changes, and I gave answers that were true and not the whole truth. Nate called often. He liked to leave voicemails that began, "just circling back," as if he had been my boss for years. I did not return them. He texted Emily and she texted me, and I answered her with a kind of stubborn compassion. "I love you. I am okay. I am not discussing the house." The petition arrived on a Thursday. I was in my office working through a stack of invoices when Caleb knocked, handed me a manila envelope, and said, "You look like someone who needs 5 minutes to swear at a cloud." Inside, Nate and Emily requested that the court appoint a guardian for my person and property because of increasing cognitive impairment and unsafe behaviors. Attached, a note from the soccer dad doctor about a cognitive screen observed during a community interaction. Also attached, a list of incidents that read like a pulp novel written by a man who had never boiled an egg. Avery sat with me on the phone while I read. "We expected this," she said. "We're ready." She scheduled a full neuropsychological evaluation with a physician who does not diagnose at soccer games and whose office does not resemble a country club. He interviewed me for 2 hours, then made me draw clocks and subtract sevens and repeat a list of words that I turned into a story because memory, too, responds to kindness. When he finished, he looked at me for a long, thoughtful minute. "Margaret," he said, "I wish I could bottle your prefrontal cortex. You're not perfect, you're human, but you are miles from impaired." His report said so in doctor words and landed on the judge's desk with a thud that knocked a few of Nate's sentences off the table. Avery filed a response that was both fierce and elegant. She included an affidavit from Ruth describing my role at Magnolia Harbor without revealing what we weren't yet ready to share. She attached letters from neighbors and friends who use phrases like community backbone and the woman who shows up. She attached the paperwork naming Rachel as my agents. She attached my own words, written in a steady hand, because Avery said judges sometimes forget the person inside the paper. The hearing was a month later. It lasted an hour. The judge was a woman with hair pulled back like a practical joke on the idea that power must be loud. She asked me 2 questions. "Mrs. Fields," she said, "do you want to live at Magnolia Harbor?" "For now," I said, "on purpose." "And do you want your daughter and son-in-law making your decisions for you?" "For now," I said, "I want to make my own." She nodded. "Petition denied," she said, and banged her gavel so gently it sounded like a kiss on a baby's head. In the hallway, Emily caught my sleeve. Her face was damp. The courthouse smelled like old paper and new fear. "I didn't mean," she began. "You did," I said softly. "And then you didn't. Both can be true." "Nate said it was the only way," she said. "He said if we didn't force it now, we'd lose the house, and then when you needed care, real care, we'd be bankrupt and—" "Stop," I said, and I put my hand on her cheek. "I know what he says. I want to know what you say." She closed her eyes. "I say I'm sorry," she whispered. "I say I miss when my husband was my husband and my mother was my mother and not a problem to solve." "Then let's start there," I said. Nate walked up, his mouth set like a wound that grew teeth. "This isn't over," he said. "It is," I said. "This part is." We walked out into bright noon. Emily held my arm, and for a moment I let her, not because I needed her to, but because she needed to feel useful. 3 days later, I invited them to Magnolia Harbor. "Why?" Nate asked suspiciously when Emily told him. "Because my mother asked you to," she said. They arrived 30 minutes late. I waited in the lobby beside the new sign that says, "We know your name." Priya walked by and squeezed my shoulder. The twins ran ahead, breathless. Nate took off his sunglasses and looked around. "This place looks different," he said. "It is," I said. We walked down the hall to the small conference room near the administrator's office. The room is intentionally boring. A table, 6 chairs, a plant even I can't kill. Ruth waited inside with a folder. Avery sat beside her with a pen. "What is this?" Nate asked. He laughed without smiles. "An intervention?" Something like that, I said. I sat at the head of the table because I own it. I have something to tell you. Nate crossed his arms. If this is about the house. It isn't, I said. It's about this building. He glanced around. He didn't see it. He couldn't. Men like Nate don't notice rooms unless the chairs face them. Go ahead, he said. I looked at my daughter. Honey, I said, I want you to hear all of it, even the part that scares you. She nodded once and took the twins' hands like they were about to cross a busy street. I turned back to Nate. You tried to put me here, I said, my voice steady as morning. So I bought it. He laughed like I had made a joke that required a big reaction. Then the laughter died because mine didn't change. What? He said. I bought it, I repeated, with partners, with a plan, with eyes open. I live here because I want to, because I won't ask anyone to live somewhere I can't sleep. I live here because I wanted to see it from the inside, and I own it because I wanted to make sure no one would ever treat me, or anyone else here, like a line item on your guy's spreadsheet again. Nate turned toward Ruth, then Avery, then the wall. He looked back at me. You bought a nursing home, he said, and the word bought slid out of his mouth like a curse. A care residence, I said. For people, not profits. You used the house, he said, triumphant, like a child who thinks he's discovered a secret and not a sentence in a book you've already read twice. No, Avery said smoothly. We did not encumber the house. We leveraged assets wisely and carefully with an investor group that values people more than margins. We will not be sharing those details with you, Mr. Collins. Nate's face went a color people use when they want to scare you. You can't keep me from knowing, he said. My wife is not your proxy, I said. She is my daughter, and she is allowed to love us both without becoming a bridge you burn to get across. He glared at Avery. This has to be illegal, he said. Avery smiled just enough to count. What part? He looked at Emily as if she could unmake a world by blinking hard enough. You knew? He asked her. She shook her head. I didn't, she said. Not until today. He turned back to me. This is insane, he said. You're 70. Yes, I said, and you're old, he said. You're vulnerable. I am older than you, I said. I am not your adjective. The twins tugged at Emily's sleeves. Mom, Oliver whispered, is Grandma in trouble? No, sweetheart, Emily said. She looked at me like a woman opening a gift she thought was a scarf and discovering it is a map. She's in charge, Nate sputtered. You can't keep us from selling the house, he said. Eventually, I said. We'll talk like people who love each other. But if you file one more petition, if you involve one more doctor at a soccer game, if you attempt to encumber my property, I will pursue legal remedies that will outlive your patience. Ruth slid the folder across the table. Nate kept his arms folded until not opening it became a smaller power than opening it. He flipped it open. Inside, a letter politely revoking his access to any of my financial information, a formal notice of removal from any prior shared accounts, and a document he did not recognize but understood immediately, a demand letter concerning the business line of credit I had co-signed for him 2 years ago, in a moment of hope that now felt like I had set a plate an inch from the edge of a table and invited gravity to try its best. You can't call this, he said. I can, I said. You defaulted, quietly but definitively. I let it slide when I thought I was keeping a family afloat. It turns out I was just making it take longer to sink. I'm done. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor like a complaint. You're making a mistake, he said. I already did, I said. This is me correcting it. He looked at Emily. Are you coming, he asked. She looked at me. I nodded. She took the twins' hands and walked out with her husband. In the hall, she turned back. I'll call you, she mouthed, and I nodded again. When the door closed, I let my chin drop to my chest. Avery squeezed my shoulder once, then left to take a call. Ruth stood beside me until I raised my head. You were magnificent, she said, also terrifying. I feel like I might throw up, I said. That too, she said, and handed me a ginger candy from her pocket like we were still 40 and pregnant. The next 6 months unspooled like a tightly wound skein, finally allowed to do what it was made to do. Magnolia Harbor began to feel like a place, not a product. We grew occupancy the old-fashioned way, by not making people regret coming here. Miss Janice's soups became legend. Andre's program had grandsons joining their grandfathers in mobility class just to see whose calves were stronger. We added a small garden out back and put a sign on the gate that said, "If you take a cherry tomato, leave a joke." The jokes were terrible and perfect. I moved back home on weekends. I wanted my porch. I wanted to wake up to my old clock and water the pothos that grows like it's showing off. I kept my bed at Magnolia Harbor because I like the way the night nurse says, "Good night, Margaret," and the way May sings to herself at 2 a.m. like the world is bigger in the dark. I like knowing the building from midnight to morning when the hum of machines and the hush of halls make a kind of prayer. Nate filed nothing else. The bank called his line of credit due. He sold a car whose cup holders he'd talked about like inheritance. He told Emily it was temporary. He said, just until, so often, she started to hear the word as a place he wanted to live. One evening in September, Emily came to my porch with a small suitcase. The sunset was the color of a ripe peach that knows it holds honey and does not apologize. "Can we stay a while?" she asked. "Yes," I said and moved aside. The twins took their shoes off at the door like they call that respect. Emily put the suitcase down and wrapped her arms around me like I was the last solid thing on a ship. She sobbed so hard I swayed. "I tried so hard," she said into my shoulder. "I tried to be everything in a house that has a hole in it." "You were too kind to put that hole on a map," I said. "He gambled and lost and gambled again," she said. "He told me the second loss would erase the first and the third would fix both." She swallowed. The math never worked. I just kept standing next to it like loyalty. "Loyalty is a virtue until it becomes anesthesia," I said. She laughed once in that shocked, grateful way people laugh when the truth matches the shape of something they've been carrying. "I asked him to leave," she said. "He said it wasn't fair. I told him fairness starts when you stop betting with other people's rent." We sat on the porch swing and let the night hold our conversation. She told me things I had suspected and things I had not. She told me she was tired of lying to our children. She told me she had interviewed for a job at the elementary school as a counselor's assistant. She told me she would rather make less and sleep more. She told me she wanted to learn how to fix what fear had taught her to break. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "for the petition, for letting him draw the map, for making you my problem when I was the one holding a match." I took her face in my hands. "I forgive you," I said, and I meant it with a gladness that startled me. "Really?" she whispered. "Yes," I said, "because you told the truth before it killed us." We made a plan that had no numbers in it. She and the kids would stay with me until she found an apartment near the school. She would handle the divorce and I would not. She would talk to the twins about why their father lived somewhere else, without telling them their father was a villain, because stories without nuance make liars of us all. We would be a family that tells the truth and does the dishes. That fall, when the leaves made a sound like applause under our feet, Magnolia Harbor did something small and enormous. We developed a ritual for arrival. On a resident's first day, we hang a paper leaf outside their door with their favorite song written on it. Staff learn the chorus by dinner. We also developed a ritual for departure. When someone dies, we ring a bell once. Then everyone who loved them says aloud one particular thing they did in the world. She made biscuits like pillows. He remembered everyone's birthday in February. She laughed at my jokes even when they were old. He taught me to shuffle cards like a magician. Grief shrinks when you give it a shape. In December, we hosted our first winter concert. The grandchildren sat cross-legged on the lobby rug. The residents wore sweaters that had stories. A retired piano teacher named Bernice played "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas," and we all sang it like we meant the lyrics. Afterward, Oliver and Grace handed out paper snowflakes to anyone who wanted one. Oliver slipped one into my hand that read, "Grandma's Harbor," and I kissed the top of his head and thought, we are a harbor because we decided to be. In January, a local reporter did a piece on how Magnolia Harbor turned itself around. She asked to interview me because that is what reporters do, find the person whose name is on the papers and pretend it's the whole story. I let her interview Ruth and Priya and Andre and Caleb and Janice and May's daughter. I stood in the background and waved once when the camera panned. The article's headline read, "We know your name, and we mean it." In March, my book club asked me to host. We read a novel about a woman who decides her life in a small town and everyone calls her brave, when all she did was stop calling herself silly. We talked about the difference between hard and complicated, and Phyllis said, "Complicated things are just hard things dressed for church." And we all clapped because sometimes a sentence is a hymn. In May, Emily moved into a 2-bedroom with light on all sides. The twins put posters up with tape like every room is a fresh chance. Nate picked them up on weekends and brought them back on Sundays with tired stories and sugary snacks. And I said nothing because you can't fix what someone else keeps breaking by pointing harder. On a Tuesday in June, I sat on the Magnolia Harbor patio with May, and we watched a storm gather itself over the far hill. My phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code wasn't. "Mrs. Fields?" a man's voice said. "This is Officer Delgado with the county sheriff's office. Your son-in-law, Mr. Collins, came in this afternoon to file a complaint claiming you're being exploited at the assisted living facility." I closed my eyes. The thunder hadn't rolled yet. The air held its breath. "Is that right?" I asked. "He says you're being coerced by staff to sign over assets," Officer Delgado said. "He says the place is taking advantage of your age." "How do we normally handle false and insulting reports weaponized for leverage?" I asked politely. "Normally," he said, "we call the person the report is about and ask one straightforward question. Are you okay?" I looked at May. She was a woman who had learned how to be young again in a body that forgot, and she blinked up at me and grinned because she could smell rain. "I am okay," I said. "I am better than okay, and I own the building." Officer Delgado was quiet long enough for me to hear him smile. "Well," he said, "that's a twist." He took a few notes. He told me this kind of complaint happens more than people know. He told me they would make a record, not because he believed Nate, but because paper remembers what we want to forget. He told me to have a nice day. I did. A week later, a thick envelope arrived addressed to me in a sprawling, earnest hand. The return address was a house I knew like an old song. Inside were 2 letters written in pencil on lined paper. "Grandma," Oliver wrote. "Dad says you live in a place that takes care of you. Mom says you live in a place that you take care of. I think both can be true because you are a double. When can I come help Andre move the blue balance thing? I won't break it this time. Also, I think the rice tastes better. Love, Ollie." "Dear Grandma," wrote Grace. With smaller letters and hearts for dots, Mom told us the truth about why you moved and why Dad was being weird. She didn't say weird, but I know. "I'm sorry I yelled at you when you made me wear a coat. I like Uno even when I lose. Can you teach me your noodles? Love, Grace." I pressed the pages to my chest and cried into them like they were cloth. Grief and gratitude are twins. They arrived together wearing each other's coat. That summer I began to write. It was not a plan. It was a need. I wrote in the early morning in the small lounge near the window that looks east. I wrote after dinner while May watched the weather report and narrated the forecast like a woman who knows the difference between rain and a reason to panic. I wrote after the phone rang and a scared daughter asked if it was normal to feel angry at a parent who fell again. I wrote between meetings and meals and moments that needed a witness. The book became a record and an invitation. I called it We Know Your Name, because when I was a teacher, the first spell I ever learned was how to say a child's name like a promise. A small press in town took a chance. It wasn't a big deal. No book tour, no NPR, no photo of me on a couch wearing tasteful shoes, but copies showed up at library book clubs and church basements and one day at a coffee shop in a town 2 hours away. A woman I did not know stopped, touched my arm, and said, "You wrote the thing that made me call my mother." I thought I would miss being invisible. I didn't. Not because I liked attention, but because the attention wasn't about me. It was about the sentence other women wanted to try on in their own mouths. I am not furniture. In October, we hosted a harvest dinner in the courtyard. The garden tomatoes were done showing off, and the air tasted like apples. Staff brought their kids. Residents wore cardigans and stories. We strung white lights and asked a teenager with a delicate tenor voice to sing 3 songs and then 3 more. Even Spencer from Haddon Senior Living Holdings showed up, hands in pockets, and said he always knew Magnolia Harbor had potential. And Ruth and I met eyes and didn't ruin the night by being right out loud. Emily stood to make a toast. Her hands shook a little. She's not a public speaker. She's a private mourner and a mother who sings while she runs a brush through a child's hair. To my mother, she said, who is exactly who she's always been, and I am just now catching up. Thank you for not letting me make you small. Thank you for showing me that the brave thing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the next true step. Everyone clapped. I held my napkin because I didn't know where else to put my hands. The twins whooped. Nate wasn't there. He had moved to a smaller apartment on the other side of town and started wearing a backpack like a student. He saw the kids on weekends and returned them with stories that slowly became truer. He stopped using the word meanwhile. It is astonishing what happens when a house is not a weapon. My porch became a porch again. The kitchen was a kitchen. The bedroom upstairs remembered how to be a room where a woman sleeps. My house no longer trembled in anticipation of a fight. It exhaled. On a Sunday afternoon in late November, Emily came over with a pot of chili and a look I recognized, a decision that scares and frees you at once. I got the job, she said, full time. The school's counselor is retiring. They want me. The pay isn't what... She stopped. The pay is enough. I want work that matches my soul, not just my bills. I hugged her until we both laughed. There she is, I said. In January of the following year, Magnolia Harbor passed an inspection with a perfect score for the first time in its history. The inspector, a woman in an expensive jacket who wore her hair in a low ponytail because she had learned how to be at work and not worry about whiplash, pulled me aside. What you've done here, she said, it doesn't show up on our forms, but it shows up on faces. We celebrated with cake that tasted like someone made it, not ordered it. Janice cried and then pretended she wasn't crying by fanning herself with a napkin. Andre did a victory lap with the blue balance thing. Priya danced with her husband like they remembered how. People ask me sometimes if I regret any of it. If I regret buying a building instead of a new car. If I regret moving into a place most people spend their last years avoiding. If I regret calling my daughter into a room and telling her the truth in front of a man who always thought his version of the truth would prevail. I regret the months I spent believing I could keep everyone I loved from feeling any pain. That is a selfish kind of kindness. It is the kindness of a jailer who hums while they lock a cell. People need their pain. That's how we learn what's not working. That's how we change. 2 years after I moved into Magnolia Harbor on purpose, the twins turned 11. We had a party for them in the family room. We hung a banner that read double digits plus 1. We played Uno. I let them win. They beat me anyway. After cake, Emily and I sat side by side on the little couch that is only comfortable when you are happy. Do you think Dad will ever be okay? Oliver asked from the floor. Emily didn't look at me. She looked at her son. I think he's learning, she said. I think learning is hard. I think we can love people who are learning and still say no when they ask us to unlearn ourselves. He nodded like he had just put a book back on the right shelf. Grace leaned her head on my knee. Grandma, she said, when I'm old, can I live where you live? You can live wherever you want, I said. And if you want to live where I live, I will make you soup. Even if I'm cranky, she asked. Especially then, I said. That night, after everyone left and the building settled into its quiet, I walked the halls. I do that sometimes. I call it rounds to make myself sound important, but really, I'm just a woman who likes to see the people she loves asleep. May snored like a gentle engine. Mr. Rockwell, who used to be a carpenter and still measures a room with his eyes, had fallen asleep with a pencil in his hand. The night nurse looked up and nodded. We don't disturb one another's dignity if we can help it. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and took off my shoes. My feet are older than they feel. My hands are steadier than I deserve. I looked at the photograph on my nightstand, Tom and me on our porch, a summer long ago. He's looking at me like he still can't believe the luck. I whispered, "Can you believe this?" And for a moment I felt certain if he was anywhere, he was laughing into his hand the way he did when life surprised him with goodness. At 72, I am not immoral. I am a woman who refused to be moved like a chair. My son-in-law wanted me in a nursing home. I wanted to live. Those are not opposing desires if the place you live is one that sees you. So I built, bought, reshaped one. I am not naive. I know control is a myth with excellent PR. Bodies betray. Brains get foggy. Even the sturdiest houses creak. But dignity is not something you hand to someone else in a binder. It's built, daily. In how you say a name, in how you sit beside someone in a hard moment, in how you say no without closing a door, in how you let people you love make mistakes without turning them into villains to justify your own anger, in how you apologize when you get it wrong, which is more often than anyone wants to admit. A few months after the twins' party, I received a letter with no return address. Inside, on a single sheet of lined paper, were 9 words written in a familiar, cramped hand. "I am sorry I tried to make you small." It was from Nate. No signature, no flourish, not even his name. Just a sentence a man had to say to become a person in his own story. I put it in a drawer with other things that once would have broken me and now simply remind me I am not in charge of the tide. Sometimes on Sundays, I sit in the lobby between the ficus that refuses to die and the armchair with the good cushion, and I watch people arrive for visits. I watch daughters who bring flowers because they need to put something pretty on a table they cannot set. I watch sons who arrive late and leave early and call back to say they'll do better, and sometimes they do. I watch grandkids who crawl into laps like time travel. I watch nurses with braids and tired ankles kneel to hear a story they have heard 6 times, because the 7th time matters. I watch a man with a scar across his cheek wheel his wife to the window where the light hits every picture better. I watch arrivals. I watch departures. I watch the way people say one another's names. Here's what I want you to hear, if you're listening, because someone slid a binder across a table and called it safety. Ask yourself whether the plan protects your dignity as fiercely as it protects their investments. Ask yourself whether the decision is about fear or love, and if the answer is fear, bring love into the room and make fear sit down. Ask yourself whether the people at the table can say the truth out loud without turning each other into problems to be solved. Ask yourself whether you can be brave without being cruel, whether you can forgive without forgetting, whether you can be old without letting anyone make you small. The day we rehung the sign out front, the one that simply says Magnolia Harbor, I asked the man on the ladder to hold while I stood on the walkway and looked up. The sun sat behind the metal letters like a halo. A car pulled into the lot and idled. A woman inside wiped her eyes with a napkin and took a breath like a diver. She stepped out, smoothed her skirt, and walked toward the door. I met her at the threshold. "Welcome," I said. "What's your mother's name?" She told me. I said it back to her like a promise. Then I stepped aside and let her walk in.